Hello, welcome. It's Catherine Gallagher here. I'm delighted to have you join me on this webinar, Mindset, which is about pivoting from stuck to feeling empowered. Life happens, doesn't it? Sometimes life events come into our life. We didn't ask for them, we didn't want them, but here they are. It might be life events that we have asked for, but maybe we're struggling and finding it hard to deal with the challenges. So in today's webinar, all I ask is that you enjoy, you engage, and you're fully present. So let's get started. When life doesn't ask us permission and something happens we have to pivot from, the real power is in how you pivot. So tell me, what is one recent pivot that you can recall that you've had to deal with? It might have been challenging for you. And as we go through this webinar, it's a good idea to keep that pivot in mind. Today's session is about learning to quieten the noise and being able to reframe our internal script, our narrative. This webinar is for you if you are going through or have gone through a pivoting point in your life. A major life transition. It might be redundancy, you might be looking for a job. It could also be that you have retired recently or are planning for retirement. Relationship issues, relationship breakdowns, whether it's partner relationship. It might also be that you are struggling with family dynamics, maybe a friendship breakdown. Or is it a health diagnosis that you are being challenged with? Any pivot leaves us feeling uncertain, stuck, overwhelmed, unsure of how to move forward all the time we can struggle. And when we think about that, we think about how it affects us, it's then about understanding where to move, and that's what we're here to talk about. So, a little bit about me. I'm Catherine Gallagher. I am a global mental health trainer. I've been talking on mental health issues since before 2005. I'm also a senior accredited psychotherapist, trainer, coach, and public speaker. And because of these different areas I work in, I can be asked to talk about burnout. Also, look at misalignment when we are finding that things that are in our life don't serve us well or are not aligned with our values. It might be that there's been a sudden change within a team, restructuring, or a personal loss, or maybe we have different responsibilities, caring responsibilities. We might be struggling with them. As a thank you for attending today, I have a 5-day mindset reset toolkit that you can request by going on my website and messaging me on the contact forum. Just put 5-day mindset reset. It is 7 days though, the mindset, just to make you aware, because I was feeling generous when I wrote it. So don't be confused if you get it and think, this is 7 days. Go with it. So it only seems fair if I'm talking about mindset reset and talking about looking at things like pivoting, that I share a pivot that I've had to go through, something that's been significant in my life. We identify what we do, don't we, as part of who we are. And I built my identity around caring for others as a nurse. I had to pivot from that career because I had a mobility challenge. Now, what actually happened was I was qualified as a nurse. I was working in general and surgical, and I was looking to know and identify what next. I was looking to pivot into specialising, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to specialise in. And one day I was in charge of a surgical ward, and a nursing officer matron came in, and she saw me making a bed that a patient who had been discharged home had left, and I was making this bed up. And as I was making the bed, I was holding on to the bed because I was in so much pain. The nursing officer said, Catherine, what's happening? What's going on here? This isn't normal. And I said, oh, it's just how it is. After a while, I start feeling that I um, have increased pain. And she said, that's not normal. And I'm always grateful for the fact that she then referred me through for some tests and investigations. And what they discovered was I had a genetic form of a mobility issue and it affects my joints. And I've had to manage that for many, many years. Maintaining my mobility has been a real challenge, but also a complete focus for me, pivoting. And I'm talking about this pivot, and there's been many since then that have led me then to where I am now. I wonder what pivots are coming up in your life. When I arrived at my calling, I like to call it, because it isn't just a job. When I arrived at the understanding that empowerment was my thing, helping others to be able to be the best version of themselves, empowering them through their challenges. Mental health and coaching areas have allowed me to do that. And as a public speaker and trainer, I talk about life experience, but I also talk about my huge depth, breadth, and knowledge of experience that I've gained through the work that I do, because I learn so much from the organizations and the individual clients I work for. And I know that they gain from me because they tell me. So let's look at today's goal. We're going to focus on understanding the patterns that form around when we have to pivot through different life events. The physiology we'll touch on, and we'll also look at mind shifts, which involve pivoting effectively so you can move forward with getting clarity, building your confidence, and finding that direction and that purpose. So, first of all, let's look at what a pivot is. A pivot is a deliberate shift in direction due to circumstances or a period of self reflection. It's not about failure, it's about realignment. And you'll hear me talking about realignment all the time. We have to do things that serve us well and that align with our life, helping us to live the best life that we can. Why do we struggle with pivots? Well, we struggle with pivots in many ways. It's usually by a fear that causes us to have challenges. You might be fearful of rejection, fearful of failure. You might have fear of being misunderstood or judged. Fear holds us back. It can serve us if it's making sure we're safe, but sometimes we get stuck in where we're at, and it's not about safety. It's about wanting to be where we are because it's comfortable and it's familiar. There's nothing wrong with having things that are comfortable. When it doesn't allow us to thrive, it becomes problematic. It also might be that we're struggling because of learned helplessness, where we tell ourselves that we can't do things, nothing good will come of it if we try. And our internal frame of reference is a lot of limiting self beliefs. And we learn to do that through past experiences and through experiences that we are currently having. And past conditioning from our upbringing, parents, significant adult role models, and that can impact us as well. And there are some common relatable thinking processes we do. As I'm going through these, I'm sure you're going, that's me. How did you know? Right? You know, the one where you question, you have self doubt, and you rewind and go over a particular thing in your mind, an event, something that you're struggling with, and you talk about inside your head how unfair it is, or you go through every single minute detail again and again and again because you're trying to make sense of it. You're trying to figure out, could something different have happened? What about that whisper, the voice that says you're not ready, that you're not good enough, it's too late, it's too little, you're too young, you're too old? And that voice is not the truth. It's a pattern that you've developed, that you've created by perfecting it. And sometimes people will say to me, you know, Catherine, I just can't be bothered thinking positive anymore. But what we find is if we ignore a situation, it doesn't go away. We're parking it, but we have to revisit it eventually. It's not about silencing your thoughts, it's about taking up your voice through a mic. It's an analogy because I'm a trainer. So let's look at brain change. I said I'd talk about physiology. So here's an outline. The amygdala triggers a fear response, and most of us are very familiar with the flight, fight, freeze response. That's about self-protection, isn't it? The prefrontal cortex, our reasoning brain, gets hijacked. Cortisol stress hormone rises, impairs our ability to make decisions. And dopamine drops when the rewards, the goals feel lost and we can't find that direction. And neuroplasticity, the process that is helpful for us to be able to form new patterns of behavior, which are locked in when we sleep, right? New patterns of behavior are locked in during our sleeping time, the deep sleep period. So the brain can remap and adapt, micro-shift, small, manageable, doable steps, and we form new patterns that stimulate the hippocampus and the ACC, anterior cingulate cortex, for emotional regulation. You don't need to remember all of these, words, if you like, for the brain. It's just giving an understanding of it. And what about the 10 reasons that we can have to pivot or find we have to pivot? So I want to talk about 10 examples. There are many more than 10, but these are the most common ones that people present to me during trainings, workshops, when I'm speaking, when I'm, working with clients one-to-one. So we'll talk about the pivots, and we'll also talk about scenarios and the brain patterns. So if you look at relationship breakdown, it might be friendship, partner relationship, might be family dynamic, you're going to shock. And an emotional hijack happens. There's an emotional hijack. Our brain seeks safety. We revert back to old patterns. We look at what's familiar, what's safe, remember. And then to move to pivot, we need to go from the pain to purpose. Looking at a purpose, looking at our learnings, looking at how to redirect our energy into building our confidence, our self-worth. Reconnecting and I guess nurturing and investing in connections out with that particular relationship. So it might be family, friends, or developing new friendships or new relationships through hobbies and interests and activities. The value alignment is important, making sure that what you choose to do next fits in with your values. What about scarce health diagnosis? We go into that survival mode. The health scare that we have, a diagnosis that we might be facing, the brain triggers survival. And to pivot from that, we have to move from fear to focus. And that's why often when people come to me with health challenges, and I shared with you, I've got my own, people learn, they like to find out about it more, be more informed often, but they also need routine. They need structure, self-care patterns. They need to be doing things that are helping them stay present, rather than overthinking, dwelling, catastrophizing, making things worse than maybe perhaps they need to be or are helpful to be. So we develop routines. It might be that we're journaling, we might be doing gratitude work, we might be looking and focusing on other things. And by doing these practices, we release the natural chemicals in our brain that make us feel good. The oxytocin is about bonding, connecting, which gives us warmth, that sense of warmth and love. And the serotonin, which is our feel good hormone, isn't it? And all of these aid healing. Healing doesn't mean to say necessarily that the health condition goes away, but it helps us to cope with it different or better. Or the healing can be, it helps us to be able to recover our health back. And what about career redundancy? We often look at our career as who we are as part of our identity. And I shared with you that felt like my identity when I was nursing. But I now can see there are many things I identify as who I am as a person. If you look at your situation to do with career, is it redundancy you're facing? Are you looking for a new career? Are you starting out and seeking work? People often ask us when they meet us for the first time, what do you do? And when we ask that, we often then look to see how to respond to it. And what we tend to do is we look at it and respond to it as what we do. But what if we are struggling, we've lost, our situation stability, we can't find it, it activates the fear loop. And we have to go from loss to legacy. We have to look at moving from that sense of loss, disappointment, rejection, and be able to look at building up who we are. I know when I work with people who are nearing end of life, they'll often talk about their legacy. As human beings, we want to know that our life matters, don't we? We want to know that we've contributed in the world and that people have recognized what we contribute. So to be able to find that legacy, we have to reframe. We have to look at things in a different, better way for ourselves, tap into that reward, dopamine driven, looking for purpose and planning ahead, planning next steps and following through and taking action. Some of you may know that in the 1980s, I developed a model which was called Think, Feel and Act. And, if you ever want to look at it and use it, then give me credit. That would be wonderful, right? Because I put a lot of time into it. So think, what we feel affects what we do. So often our internal self-talk is that talk that is pivotal to how we feel. And we're led by our emotions. So if you're talking to yourself in a supportive, kind, compassionate, and caring way, if we're encouraging ourselves, if we forgive our errors and we see them as learning opportunities, then we can then grow from them in a helpful way. However, if you're constantly putting yourself down, if you're saying things to yourself that are unkind, then you diminish your sense of worth and value. You also question your contribution, and that's really unhelpful. And I often have people that talk to me about empty nest, parents who have found that their children have moved out of the house. They might be going into further education. It might also be that they've left because they have to go and seek work elsewhere. They might also have family change. And that sense of loss of daily purpose, what does this make me? Who am I? I used to be this person who cared for this person, and I no longer have that, and I feel lost. Or I used to be a parent, I used to be a guardian, I used to look after, and now I'm no longer needed. And of course you are. It's just different. It's in a different way. It can lead us to an identity crisis. And to pivot, we have to redirect that nurturing that self-growth and start to focus on our contributions and expand our contributions and how we look at how we actually contribute to other people and to ourselves. And by having that curiosity of what to do next, what can I add to my life? What value can I see in my life? The neural joy pathways we can then reactivate via doing novelty, new things, and also by connecting with social bonding with family, friends, and making new relationships and new friendships. And if we've had a sudden financial hit, we go into threat to survival, and that's triggered. And then it's about scarcity, isn't it, as a mindset? And people that come to me who are struggling financially, I'm not a financial expert, but I have managed benevolent funds and helped people manage their finances. And I refer people on for financial expertise if they need it. When we regulate that fear, we stop, we breathe, we pause, and we start engaging looking at solutions. Solution focused thinking, it's called, empowerment tools to raise executive functioning. So we start looking at what can I do about this? It might be you have to do without certain things. You might have to pare back some of the things you're doing. You might have to do maybe a budgeting accounting system where you allocate certain funds to certain things and that helps you to budget better. Or you cut out all the things that you saw that you needed, but actually it was a want, it was a luxury. And then when I get asked to talk about business, I've been running my own business, Step Up CMG Limited, since 2002. And I'm often asked about business, looking at leadership skills, looking at emotional intelligence, starting to help people understand how to effectively communicate better, and being able to look at management leadership styles. So I'm often asked to consult with in organizations and from management. I go into schools, I go into colleges sometimes as well, and universities, and I talk about how we hold ourselves. Our leadership starts from within. When we feel that things haven't worked out the way that we wanted them to, we might feel that something has failed, we've failed. We go into shame, that shame loop, and we ruminate, we dwell on. And it's important to reflect and review something, but not to get stuck with it by ruminating and dwelling on it. What are the learnings? What can I grow from this? How can I move forward with this insight and knowledge so that it's not been something that I fear looking at and thinking about, because I know that I got something that's exceptionally valuable from. So reframing failure into feedback and learning opportunities is very helpful. It builds a resilience, also helps through this growth mindset neurochemistry with the dopamine plus the internal reward cues that we give ourselves. How do you recognize your strengths? How do you motivate yourself? How do you keep yourself in the right path? How do you not get derailed easily? These are important questions when you are reviewing a situation, particularly within a business or work environment or in life. Let's be honest. Is about being able to look at things in a way that's actually going to be constructive. And I'm big on setting down small dopamine boosting activities. So it might be that you reward yourself and incentivize yourself by, if I complete this at this time, I'm then going to do this. If I go for a walk or a run or a jog or whatever it is, a cycle, I'm going to feel that I'm rewarding myself. We start looking at how to block building blocks. I guess that's probably a good way of thinking about it. You're building those blocks that give you that leap into moving forward. And then there's relocation, or a major move. And that can be spurred on because of circumstances. Maybe you've got to move to a different location because of a job or seeking employment. It might be that you've had to move because you're downsizing with financial challenges. It could also be that you're downsizing because there's empty nest syndrome, right? There can be lots of reasons why we have to relocate or have a major move. We know that when we have these, opportunities, sometimes we can look at them, but sometimes we see them as, something we don't want to have happen. It's very disorientating and it affects our social detachment. It's called social detachment. So our attachments to where we are, to the location, to the people, to the friends, to the family that are close by, perhaps, we start feeling detached socially because that support system's no longer available. If we lean into that mindset when we pivot into discovery, it's new, it's novel, we're looking for new things, new experiences, and that's to trigger the neural expansion so that our brain is open to new pathways, developing new routines and new systems so that we can feel grounded. And what if you've got loss of confidence? Our brain defaults to the old belief systems, those limiting beliefs where you're telling yourself that you can't, you shouldn't, or it won't. And that can take many forms. And to pivot from something like that, it's important to challenge that distorted self talk. Being able to write it down, reflect on it, and look at it as a different, better way. And we introduce the mirror neurons for compassion and positive modeling. And these mirror neurons are exceptionally important because they help us to give ourselves that compassion, that care, that kindness. And that then helps to build our confidence because we have more self-worth and self-esteem. And then there might be loss of a companion pet, or it might be, a loss of circumstances. Loss is very different for different people. And it might also be, sadly, that you've had a bereavement, a death in the family, or maybe you've lost a friend, right? What happens is there's emotional flooding. The limbic system has dominance there. And we have to allow ourselves to process that loss and grieve the loss, whatever it is. We need to come to terms with it and an acceptance. That acceptance stage isn't saying it's okay, it's just saying it is what it is. And if you look back in the different stages of loss and processing, that it's loss of a relationship, loss of circumstances, loss of a home, whatever it is, if you've lost a person, then we experience Sometimes shock, denial, disbelief. We bargain. I would do anything if I would do this, if only I could have. And sometimes we bargain to a higher power. We also then might experience sadness, numbness. We might feel that we are lost without that person. And these are all human and normal experiences and feelings. It's not until sometimes people talk to me about feeling depressed or sad, and then they get angry. They feel anger at that person or anger at circumstances. We look often for someone to blame. Until we come to that point where we can move forward with acceptance, being able to say, I know this has happened. I might not have wanted it, I might not have liked it, but I'm accepting the fact that it is what it is. And that helps us then with our storytelling and the symbolic healings. We have rituals, don't we, for losses, right? We might write letters, we might, have a wake, we might, look at scattering ashes if someone's been cremated, or we might look at, attending a grave site to honour that person. Some people write poetry, some people write songs, some people, decide that the best way that they can actually honour the loss is to come to terms with it, accept it, whatever it is, and to move forward. I like to think that if I've lost someone close to us, and I've experienced a lot of loss in my life, I like to think then that it's the person never truly leaves us because we remember them in our heart and our mind. Being stuck without a clear reason, sometimes people go into automatic pilot, and that automatic pilot mode tunes out any kind of sense of what it is, what's going on. And to introduce a small disruption is really important. So you activate the ACC and the PFCs that I've talked about before, so that you can look at new choices, you can question, you can challenge, and you can find those goals to prompt and to allow you to move forward, to access what's going on, to get in touch with what's going on within you. So here's a pivoting framework I put together because I thought it would be helpful, just really to be able to make sense of what we've just covered. The first one is pause, where we regulate our emotions. Then we process and acknowledge our thoughts and feelings and our stories of what's went on. And we might do that through mindfulness or reflection work. We might do that through gratitude work, journaling. It might be yoga, meditation, walking, exercise. But processing our thoughts is really important. Sometimes we talk through and share our experiences to people around us, and they then tell us their thoughts and they help us to piece things together. And then pattern interrupt, do something new or opposite to what you've been doing. Because if you keep doing what you're doing, you get more of what you've got. Okay? And then you have to plan those micro shifts, those small micro goals, and do it with intention, that you're doing it intentionally and with a vision of where you're heading. So you can then make sure that when you're pivoting, you're doing so in a way that's aligned with your values. And it allows you to align then with action and with confidence with that action because it feels right. And brain alignment tools are, as I've mentioned previously, it can be breath work where you are calming the amygdala. It can be gratitude work, and I've talked about gratitude because journaling and gratitude increases dopamine, the reward system. And all of these actually, in effect, release natural chemicals and make us feel good. Okay, so it's always good to find one or two of these to do every day in simple ways. I love gratitude practice. I do breath work. I do reframing. You can probably tell that from the way I present. And also I do mirror affirmations as well for empathy. And I look at cortisol, managing my cortisol stress levels. I actually have mentioned these because I put all of these into practice. And I've worked at doing so. It's not something that's just happened. It's not because it's me, it's because I've worked at it. And it takes 66 times to create a better pattern of behaviour. And what we're really talking about is self-investment. When you invest in yourself, by choosing to do these, you're saying, actually, it is important, my health, my mental, physical, and emotional well-being, and I am worth investing in these. And they can take very little time. It doesn't have to be a long time that you do. It could be 3 or 4 or 5 minutes or 10 or 15 minutes, however long you want to practice these, morning or night or during your break. But doing them all the time helps to regulate your system, decompress, de-stress. I did an article which is just about to be published called The Power of Pause, talking about those rested, restful moments and days and how essential they are, and how neuroscientists have actually confirmed that's the case. So whether it's breath work, whether you practice gratitude, for instance, I know when I finish this webinar, I'm going to be grateful that I've been able to do this and bring it to you and that you've listened. I'll also be grateful for the things that I've had happen during the day. The small things like being able to get parked, right? Somebody smiling, saying hello. Small things allow us to let in gratitude, but we have to point our brain towards these moments and pay attention. Otherwise, our brain just sees what isn't going right, what isn't working, because that's what our brain does. Our brain is programmed to look at what doesn't work to protect us. Your job, my job, is to retrain our brain, rewire our brain by practicing and developing new pathways in our brain so that we can then start seeing things in a more balanced perspective. Reframing is looking at things in a different, better way for yourself. I've mentioned that there's a mindset reset worksheet. I've also done one for pivoting. And if you want any of these, feel free to go onto my website and just say that you want the pivoting worksheet or the mindset reset one. Movement's really important, whether it's swimming, dancing, running, walking, whatever you do to release the cortisol stress is important so that you're not building up stress and pressure within your body. And one of the most effective things is to do stretching exercises, right? So you can do that, you can do walking. If you're not somebody that is able to or capable of doing, HIIT exercises or weights or, running, on treadmills or whatever. And we've talked about mirror affirmations. Affirmations is about our emotions, our feelings. And we know that through studies and research that if we are someone that acknowledges the pain, the discomfort, the sadness, we process our feelings, and we're able to then pivot to looking at something in a different, better way for ourselves. And that means operating at those high energy affirmation levels where your feelings are about joy or acceptance or recognition, gratitude, passion. Because if we're not careful, we can stay within that lower energy affirmation energy levels where it's disappointment, sadness, dejection, disillusionment. I could go on. There's so many feelings we can feel, isn't there? So affirmations is a very helpful practice, working at our energy and our emotional level, as well as mindfulness. Mindfulness teaches us how to stay with the here and now, be present and be available. Now, this is a quote that I put out, and people often quote it back to me. Your mindset is the lens through which your worth and your future becomes your power when you change them both. And that's why I talk about live empowered. So we talked about life pivoting moments. What about the day-to-day events that we find that we come into contact with? And that might be to do with technology. Maybe you're taping, like me, a webinar and you're creating content, or you're filming something and then technology fails. Rather than looking at it as something that is upsetting or disappointing, rather than looking at it as a failure, you might shift to another device. And then it becomes more about imperfect and it becomes more powerful. What about sudden cancellation? A friend, a family member, a client, or a key meeting has been cancelled last minute. Instead of losing momentum, you look at it as, well, I can now focus on me, on my vision, on what next. I can recognise that I've gained time back. I say this all the time to people. If something, has been moved or I've been able to move things around, or somebody says to me, I can't make it right now, I then say, well, when can you make it? When's the right time? When's the best time? We'll find a mutual agreement. And then I look at that time that I've gained back, and I use it in a way where I might be recharging, I might be going for a walk, I might be doing something that I need to do, but I haven't had the time or made the time to do it yet because it's not needed. And I go, well, okay, got this time back. What can I do? What's the best use of my time? In what way and how do I use this time effectively? Burnout. How many of us experience burnout? Many of us will talk about that, won't we? We'll talk about, how we feel that things are getting on top of us and how difficult it is sometimes to be able to recognize and appreciate that when we feel exhausted or fatigued, when things are foggy, when we wake up and we're drained, that instead of getting on with it and pushing through it, taking that pivoting moment where you take a light walk or you stretch, you do stretching exercises, where you might journal for a moment to ground yourself. You might be listening to a self-help podcast or listen to a webinar like this, and that helps to energize you and shift your mindset. Releasing those senses of build-up of pressure prevents you going from stretch to strain to crisis. So mental block, sometimes we find that, we're working on something, we're doing something, and then we can't seem to find what next. We get that block. I've got that mind block, that mental block. One of the most important things we can do is to actually talk it out rather than keeping it within ourselves. Because if you only rely on an internal script, that's only our perspective. Other people can create new perspectives for us, can give us different ways of looking at things. It's like if I'm, driving somewhere and the GPS isn't giving me the right directions, I'm not going to drive around aimlessly. I'm going to stop and find someone that's, nearby, or I'm going to go to a garage or a shop and I'll ask them because they're likely to know because they're in the area. And it's about gaining back the momentum so that you can then move forward instead of feeling stuck or frustrated or irritated. And then that financial setback, an unexpected bill happens, right? And you go, oh no, and then you have to stop spiraling because you go, well, that's not really helping me. The panicking, the frustration, the anger, this isn't fair, doesn't help. So we review, we reframe, and we look to gain focus so we can find a what next. What's the next micro step that I can take would be the most helpful. It might be that you seek out looking for someone's advice, expertise, family member, an uncle, a friend, a family, an auntie, whoever. You might seek professional help. But depending on what it is, isn't it? If it's something like, for instance, here we do factoring bills. If somebody, gives you a huge factoring bill and you suddenly weren't expecting it, then that can be a real blow. It can feel terrible. And being able to then look at negotiating payment plan or, realizing that it was essential, it was necessary, it had to get done, and you have to pay it anyway because it's a legal requirement. And so sometimes we just have to reach that point and gain control. What happens if someone tells you something, it comes across as quite hard-hitting? You receive negative feedback, whether it's online or in person, and sometimes we default to reacting. When we do that pause for thought, I like to call it pause for thought, we recenter, we take a breath, and we then are able to pivot our response. Instead of getting defensive, we can be reflective, and that gives us area and room for growth. People don't listen to angry people, so if we get defensive, people get defensive back or they retreat. That's just human nature. And if somebody doesn't show up, what do you do then? Do you sit and get really annoyed or frustrated or upset? Or do you use that time wisely? Sometimes we're looking for support and someone can't be there for us, maybe because they've got their own thing that they're dealing with and we don't know about it. But if somebody's not turning up and showing up for you on a regular basis, then maybe you need to think about the priority that you are for them. And if they're not prioritising you, then you need to find and surround yourself with people who will. Reconnecting with your own self-trust and the community around you that will show up, that do show up, is important. That helps with our confidence, our self-esteem, and our self-worth. What if there's a sudden overwhelm? Everything feels too much. And your pivot from that is about, rather than multitasking, to start microtasking, doing one small, doable, manageable step, breaking it down so it's meaningful and it becomes something that you can manage and take control of. And our body does have a way of signaling to us when we're doing too much, doesn't it? You know, that whisper that tells us we're tired, we're exhausted, there's tension, headaches. We feel that our pressure, stress, and strain is heading in that direction. And instead of pushing, you don't want to go from having comfort to stretch and then go from stretch all the way through to crisis. We need to learn and learn to learn to how to manage our body and listen to our body. Because our body is an amazing way of signaling to us when something isn't okay. Sometimes we just don't pay attention to it. So having that rest and that pause and being able to stop and reflect and heal and help you to be able to decompress is really essential. It's a helpful choice to make. And it is a choice. It's a decision and a choice. Change in plans sometimes happen, don't they? You maybe been planning something for a long time, personal or business, and then suddenly the boundaries, the parameters get moved or shifted. Suddenly it falls through. And the pivot to that is not seeing it as a disaster, a catastrophe, or seeing it as a failure. It's about redirecting that and seeing, well, I can do something else that would be well aligned for me, something that's going to serve me better. Because if something doesn't work out, you've gained that time back. You can also choose to do something else in its place. It's a choice. So we're coming to the end of the webinar, and I just want to thank you for being here and listening to this. And I would love any feedback that you have. Any testimonials would be fantastic. If you've got anything you want to give me feedback or a testimonial, please message me on my contact form on my website. And a final message to be empowered and a takeaway for you. This is a quote I came up with because I live empowered. I'm an empowerment result coach, and I work with people individually and organizations, as I said before, to help be in that empowerment mindset. You can't always control the situation, but you can always control the pivot, and that's your power. So thank you so much for being here. A bit of reflection point here is where your life is at. What do you feel a pivot is necessary, is well overdue? Because we all have things that we have to pivot from. And what is the limiting self-belief that you're telling yourself that's keeping you stuck with that particular pivot? And what's the most manageable next step that you could take today towards making that pivot happen? So thank you so much. It's been Catherine Gallagher bringing this to you. It's a delight and pleasure, and thank you. And please feel free to give me any comments and feedback and testimonials. Bye for now.